Can I just going back to the town centre again and touch on the subject of things like permitted developments?
Yeah.
I sensed with Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister's speech about build, 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 that a place like Harlow could be open season, Wild West for permitted developments all over the place. And I sensed that, rightly or wrongly, Robert Halfon was getting his defence in first with a recent press release. And how are you, if that is true, how are you going to prevent that from happening?
Well, look, I've got the greatest of respect for Robert Halfon. He's an accomplished MP, a senior MP now, with an important role on the Education Select Committee. But his attempts to shift responsibility for Tory legislation, permitted development, that allowed the conversion of blocks like Temple Fields without any planning permission, without any input from Harlow Council, onto Harlow Council is misleading at best. Let's be clear. Permitted development is Conservative legislation introduced in 2013, and Mr Halfon is on record as saying it's had unintended consequences. So he's accepted responsibility. He needs to now do something to protect us from permitted development too. He is our voice in Westminster. That's where the change needs to happen.
But and linking on regarding permitted developments, you had pledges from people at Enfield Council. Pledge are one thing. Have you any evidence that councils at Enfield and others are actually no longer sending people to Harlow?
Well, I think the COVID crisis has put an awful lot of pressure on councils across the South East in terms of temporary accommodation. The successful programme initiated by the government that nobody should be out, everybody in, I think it was called, added extra pressure. Now that the death rate is falling across the southeast, now that I'm in a position to focus on things other than COVID, I intend to go back on that. But I have had one very good bit of news today. Some 15 minutes before you arrived, I had an email from Councillor Sarah Bedford, who's the leader of Three Rivers Council. Now, they outsourced some of their temporary accommodation issues through Broxbourne Council and found temporary accommodation out of borough here in Harlow using some of these permitted developments. I met with her last year. She promised that this wasn't a situation she was comfortable with, but she couldn't give me a time frame for when she would finally be able to end the out of borough placements in Harlow. 9:45 this morning, I've had an email. The last out of borough placement from Three Rivers in Harlow has now been returned to Three Rivers, and that's one more council amongst the many of all different colours. There are Conservative councils very close to here, Labour councils and Liberal Democrat councils who have been using Harlow as somewhere to send difficult to house residents into temporary accommodation, and that needs to end.